on employee resistance to change. And so basically this is an objective from my PhD studies, and I found it quite interesting to share with you all. I know it's a bit off from all the interesting presentations I've been listening from, but I'm just realizing the power of multidisciplinary research, where you find yourself entwining in different ways. I could relate to his research, I could relate to your research in some kind of way, so I do hope you relate with my study. And so I looked at a bit of background on my study. I looked at, my case study was basically the auto dealerships in the eThekwini region, and I was inspired to do that because I realized that the management of employees in the dealership is quite dogmatic and very, very hectic. Policies are being placed on them without giving them direction, proper guidance on how to, cope with the change, accept the change, and commit to the change. And I think that's the reason why I took interest in this study. Oh, what's happening? Sorry, I think I went too fast. Okay, so that's the table of contents I have here. And without much ado, I've introduced the background of the study. And basically, I just want to say that with regards to the study, we focused on the sample size of 170 participants, even though based on the research formula, I ought to have, collected like 300 questionnaires. But understandably so, I could only afford 170, which was quite interesting to carry on my research with. And since I'm focusing on demographic factors, I looked at how age, gender, tenure of service, your department could either assist you in committing to change or resisting change. And based on what scholars have said, based on scholars on change management, it was stated that most often than not, employees that are quite older find it difficult to accept change, And basically, if we can relate to it practically. We see in our organizations now, for instance, when the COVID hit, we were told to go online to lecture, and a lot of older lecturers struggle with the online lecturing. And compared to the younger generations, the millennials and the Gen Zs, they are more tech savvy. So basically, things like this is what the dealership organizations struggle with. The younger ones are prone to accept changes. And then based on educational qualifications, basically when you're more educated, you're prone to understand what is going on, circumstances and events, the quality of your life and thinking and thought processes, it's better. And then change becomes easier compared to ones that are not quite educated. And then also based on the gender and what scholars have to say about gender with regards to resistance to change, it was indicated that women are prone to, accept changes because, we deal with a lot. We're multi-taskers. So we adapt to changes compared to the male gender. So it was interesting to see if what all of the scholars have mentioned is actually making sense. And that's the reason for looking into this aspect of study. How does age, gender, tenure of service, and all of that, does it really affect the extent to which they accept or resist changes that are being introduced in the organization? So I don't want to waste time, but this is what the introduction has to say, basically explaining the essence of employee resistance to change. And I think that has to do with your feelings towards change. Is it easier for you to accept policies that have been laid out, strategies that have been implemented? How do you battle or struggle with accepting or resisting? So that's what employee resistance to change basically is all about. And based on the demographic, it's interesting to see what our aims and objectives has to say about it. So the aim is to investigate if these factors actually, trigger resistance or not, and then identify if employees, based on these factors we have mentioned, perceive change as something to accept or, resist. And so my theoretical studies underpin from the transformational leadership study, but I would just say, with regards to the study, since we're looking at demographic factors, we decided to look at what we call the OREC theory. When you're testing on resistance to change, you look at OREC theory, and OREC theory has to do with 3 factors or 3 dimensions that actually states the strength of resistance. So the first dimension is cognitive rigidity. When you believe or perceive that change is difficult, it actually becomes difficult for you. And that is how life is. Whatever you think about, whatever you magnify, becomes your reality. So when we see people or employees that insist that this is difficult, change is difficult, it actually becomes difficult for them. And then we move on to short-term focus. We also have employees that could accept change for a while, but because of their limitation to focus on what is being implemented, they lose sight of it, they're not able to cope anymore. And thirdly, we have what we call routine seeking. So these are basically dimensions: routine seeking, short-term focus, cognitive. They are dimensions of resistance to change, which is used to test, the extent to which employees either accept or resist change. So routine seeking has to do with your adaptation to change. People are used to routines in most organizations. When you're used to doing things a certain way, it's difficult for you to adapt and be flexible to change introduced. So another concept to this study is the demographic factor, which we have talked about: age, gender, education, tenure, and department in the organization. So based on this literature theories, we look at the conceptual framework, which was formed from the factors we have mentioned against the 3 dimensions of resistance to change. So let's want to test how each of those factors, the extent to which they cause resistance in the organization. And then for the methodology, as I said earlier, we looked at 170 participants. Based on the target population, then when I was carrying out my PhD studies, it report stated that there were over 660 automobile dealership organizations in South Africa and 278 in KwaZulu-Natal. So based on the research formula I applied, it was supposed to be 300 participants for me to use, which I did. I tried to give out that number of questionnaires, but unfortunately, the return rate was just what I had to work with, which was 170 participants. So this is what my results turned out to be. And then basically on this table, we have the profile of proportions, the percentage of the male to females in these organizations I worked with. So basically there were a little bit more percentage of males than females, and the age disparity, we could see that more of the employees were between the ages of 18 to 25, and the department as well, we can see the proportions of, the frequency and percentages of each and every of those. So we'll move on to the descriptive statistics of the study, and we realized, based on, compared to what scholars had to say, the largest group of respondents were between 25 and 34 years old. And also the gender, there were slightly more males than females. The tenure of work, the participants' tenure of work were recorded as follows. Okay, so we see that there were 60% of them have worked between 0 to 5 years, and then 2.4% have been in their jobs for between 16 and 20 years. So you might want to ask why very low percentage of people have worked for so long. I think it's because they can't cope with the changes that have been introduced in these organizations. So we go on, and we come up with the influence to see how our hypothetical structure was being formed. We want to see how these demographic variables were able to, have an impact in resistance to change at this eThekwini dealership companies we looked at. So our first hypothesis stated that there is a significant association between demographic factors and routine seeking. And the second hypothesis, there's a significant association between demographic factors and cognitive rigidity. And the third hypothesis is a significant association between demographic factors and short-term focus. And then based on the 3 hypotheses, we were able to carry out our test with the chi-square, and it was perceived that not necessarily does age have an impact on cognitive rigidity. So as I said before, cognitive rigidity has to do with your perception to life, your perception to things, to resistance that you're facing. So based on the test that was carried out, there wasn't any significant relationship between age and resistance. There wasn't any significant relationship between also the gender and all of it, but it was noted that in the departments, in the Newcastle's, there was a proportion of them that, cognitive rigidity was a problem. And I can say it could be because of the kind of leadership they had in that department, because remember, every department has got a manager. So if your manager is not able to help the team as a department work together to accept change and to commit to whatever has been introduced, it also becomes an issue. So now we can see an aspect of leadership coming into the study. So we have the second table, also testing with chi-square how demographic factors is affecting cognitive rigidity, and the third one, how demographic factors is also affecting short-term focus. So in summary, I would like to state that at the end of the day, because after my study was carried out, it was observed that 27 of the participants from the Newcastle's department strongly disagreed with the statement, which means that a higher number of them accepted that, they were prone to, routine seeking, and because of that, they couldn't accept change easily. So, but the other 2 hypotheses stated otherwise. So at the end of the day, we can't really say that it could be age or gender or whatsoever that actually affects resistance to change or triggers resistance to change. It could be maybe the leadership, As I said, I believe that leaders make a lot of impact in the way management is being run in every sector of the organization. Higher education, health, every aspect of the organization. So not necessarily the demography, because people learn at different places, but if you're able to meet them halfway, we all learn at different capacities. Some people, you teach them today, they forget tomorrow, but a patient teacher or a patient leader will realize that, okay, this person works at this pace, and try and meet such a person halfway. So basically, the discussion